think we're good.
Thank you.
All right. I sent the minutes out last night about midnight electronically, but I also gave a hard copy there if you want to take a minute. But
That's good, because I've not even looked at them, so.
okay. It's 5:33. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Let's see, 5:33. Is there any public comment? No public comment. Roll call. Let's see, Dale Tolley?
Here.
Malone Marshall?
Present.
Carmen Lewis? Absent. Lenore Noble? Absent. Dave Byrne?
Here.
And Mike Cobbs? Absent. And I am present. We have a quorum. And if you want to take a minute to look over those minutes.
I'd like to make sure that we add an exclamation mark after some of my sentences, too.
Okay, there's
Those things are vitally important.
Well, I had to add that exclamation mark to make your point, Alderman Tolley, you know, that we make sure we get it right.
Exactly, get it right.
So now that I've started something,
Duly noted, thank you.
I'll make a motion to approve these as presented.
okay, there's a motion made to approve the minutes.
Second.
Okay. Aaron?
Aye.
Okay, hold on one second. And Marshall? Okay, motion made to approve the minutes by Barron, second by Malone Marshall. Barron?
Aye.
Tolley?
Aye.
Malone Marshall?
Aye.
I myself's an aye. Minutes are approved. Under old business, we had a discussion on temporary lease option of city-owned property for hydroponic agricultural and retail shops. So we've had discussion on that. It went over to Economic Development Committee, and it was pretty much the same committee members that were in this chamber. So didn't really get much out of that committee, but you know, at this point, I think we pretty much separated, you know, the two, because we're really dealing with two different things. You know, you got the retail and you got the lady that wants to grow the hydroponic in the containers. And, you know, right now we have a lot of city lots that aren't generating any revenue. And this is a resident that has brought this before the committee for consideration. So the reason it came here is we don't have anything in the code or zoning that would allow the use of these containers. So I'd like to turn it over to the city planner, if that would be okay.
Thank you. I'll also add that this went to planning board, and they also reiterated a lot of the discussion that happened here at ordinance committee about decoupling these two topics and moving something simpler through to allow for the hydroponic container. So what I've put together is an amendment to the zoning code. It includes two new definitions. One would be for urban farm, and the other is for cargo container. They're pretty generic definitions, except I would add that it's not just hydroponics. So I think if we're going to allow this, I think there are a number of different types of growing that can happen in a container like this. So aquaponics, hydroponics, vertical farming are all included in that. So it just is gives us a little bit more flexibility in case we get another application that's kind of similar.
Just for clarification, I mean, you know, we're in these containers, they're going to be growing food products and not anything else, correct?
Correct, yes. And then in Chapter 3, under the general provisions of the zoning ordinance, this would be a new chapter titled Urban Farm and Cargo Container. And it details that land use would be permitted on property owned by the city of Kankakee, subject to a number of conditions. And that includes approval by the city council of the subject property location and also an annual lease agreement. And that the applicant also files an application that includes their name, address, phone number, if they have someone installing the shipping container or constructing it on the property, if we would want their information as well. And then a pretty basic site plan that just shows location, layout, setbacks, any major features that are nearby, location of existing trees and access roads and access points. And I think staff can work with our applicants on these, since this would be on our own property. The applicant would also have to obtain a building permit, and they would need to comply with any and all building, fire, zoning regulations, and also acquire business licensing. So those are really just the high topics of the ordinance, and if you have any questions, let me know.
There's a lot of things in place here, one being a lease, agreement, so the things that be put in place, and that is pretty much whatever the wishes are. But, and it's also got to be approved by the city council on an individual basis, so it's not like these containers are just going to show up and, one day you're going to drive down your ward and go, oh, what's that doing here? So, right now, for what she's trying to do, I think that's why we're separating this. It's pretty basic, it's not like people are going to be, doing retail out of these things and people are coming and going even, so I think it's, the impact on, wherever it's going to be, will be very small.
I had got a question on this. Now, right now it's saying on property owned by the city of Kankakee. So now, what happens when somebody that owns their own property decide they want to do one on their own property, and they want to argue that if we do it on city property, why can't they do it on their own property?
Because this is a pilot program. We're actually trying to see if this is going to work, and if it works, the only controls in place that we have right now is that it's a pilot program, and it has to go through city approval with a lease agreement, and there's some controls in place, safeguards, call it. If it works, then obviously, it could be looked at, for private property. But that opens up a whole different, ball of wax.
I understand that. That's why I'm saying, so how do we justify it being on city property but not a private owner's property?
Well, that gives the city some control over where these can be located, and I think the last thing we probably want to see is a bunch of storage containers in residential areas.
I don't want to see.
I'm sorry.
That's my point.
Well,
At this point, it's, this is the only lady that's come forth in regard to this, but, being a pilot program, that's why you have to have some safeguards. If you open it up to everybody at the moment, it could be a free-for-all.
Yeah,
Right.
that's what I'm saying. I don't want to open them up
Right.
to everybody
No.
ever, even though there's a lot of properties, that are just, vacant properties.
Right.
And just because they're vacant properties, I don't want to see people start buying these
Right.
properties and just
Right.
putting these trailers all over the neighborhood. I just don't want to see that. That's
No.
why that's what I'm speaking on, to make sure that people understand
Right.
that this is saying, for this particular one, property owned by the city, wonderful, how do we just keep it on city-owned properties?
Well, as far as zoning goes, right now would be a commercial,
I can answer that, but I think that, you're not wrong. If somebody questions, they might feel like they have the right to do that. But that still would require us to change the ordinance. The city council would have to authorize that change to the zoning ordinance. And I think if we get questions about that, and we have real applicants that want to do this because this is successful and they want to see that on private property, we can have those conversations when that happens. And I think this is a good way for us to start and dip our toes into this. And even with this applicant, if this doesn't work out for some reason, we're going to be reviewing this on an annual basis. So, and we'll learn more, I think, from Jenny and her operation of this site and what those pitfalls are and ways to better regulate so that if we are at that point where we want to potentially open it up or not open it up, it would be up to the council, though, to do that, ultimately. I think that's just it would be for future. We could just assess that if we got those requests in the future.
I guess it'd be no different than, an applicant coming forth and not having the zoning on, let's say, a residential lot for an auto body shop. So they're going to have to go through planning and zoning and say, I'd like to do this at this location, but yet you're not zoned for it, and that would have to go through, a notification process, the planning and zoning. They would have to look at that and go, it either fits that location or it don't,
And we may end up, and just to think like kind of in the future, and to piggyback on what Alderman Larzik is saying, is that we could decide if we get an applicant that wants to do on private property and is really pushing for that request, we could consider a map amendment if we wanted to at that time, and we could require a conditional use. And then at that time, we could apply it to all property. We could pull back this ordinance where it applies to all property, and then maybe the city of Kankakee's property still requires that lease agreement because it's with us, but then those properties would all be treated the same at that time. But I think that would be something for future discussion.
Right,
Yeah.
and that's where this is separate from, like, the retail containers. If you have shops setting up, it's night and day, in my opinion, so.
I had one question. Do we want to make it an annual lease in the ordinance itself? I mean, that seems to be, that's a pretty, you have to get back here pretty often.
So we could just leave it as a lease agreement, and then the terms would be in that lease agreement.
And started out, it makes sense that it'd be a 1 year, but just in case there's a situation where you don't want to come back every single.
Well, if you look at your business licenses, most of those are, an annual basis, and I don't see it be any different,
Yeah, except you don't need to get city council approval for.
That part, yes, so. That would definitely be but I think for call it testing purposes, a pilot program, I don't see, we're trying it for a year, it's not going to, it's going to give us good results, or it's going to end the program.
That's like any specific lease can still be for a year. It's just not every single, not cabinet in so much, so it always has to be a 1 year necessarily.
Right. Well, like typical leases, it can be terminated by either party, so after, you could continue, right? Or an agreement to continue that, lease as long as, everything been complied with and there's no violations.
I would say I would hope that we would never make containers available on residential zone property.
No.
That would be, if ever expanded, I think that would be a bad idea, for sure.
That's what I think would be a bad idea.
Any other suggestions that you see? So I guess the question would be is, want to make a motion?
So this does have to go to planning board for a hearing, and I'm targeting this May 20th meeting, and then to council for the text amendment approval. So you could motion to move it forward, subject to the hearing recommendation from planning board.
Yeah.
And obviously, it's gonna go through planning. Planning's already, it's been before it. I don't know if you had a chance to watch that, but there was interesting questions, and they were all good. So obviously, it's gonna go through pretty much the same process as anything else would, through planning and zoning, so.
Doing a hearing on it, does that mean we have an identified location, or is this just a general?
It's a hearing on the text amendment to the code. So it's to add this language into our ordinance. The zoning code requires a public hearing
Gotcha.
for text amendments.
So is this right now in just commercial areas, or is it?
It's not, but we could restrict that right in here, but the city council does get approval of the property location. So, I mean, if the city council doesn't want it on a residential property, they don't have to grant it there.
Right.
So pretty much if you, let's just hypothetically say, I don't know, somewhere over where your laundromat was or something, like, and you're not, you just don't want it there. Obviously, you're not gonna have to get approval. So you got teeth in that, so I don't know that you'd want to restrict it to certain type of zonings, but you don't want it right in, like you say, in a residential, residential area. I assume that'd be something they would discuss in planning and zoning. Like I say, me personally, I'm open to I don't have a horse in the race here outside of, she's a resident, she's the only one that brought this forth, and I think it's kind of a neat concept that you get, 2 acres of product out of a very small container of.
Yeah.
I mean, it's actually impressive. But,
The edible flowers?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Edible flowers and basil.
Yeah.
Cool.
My family always freaks when I eat the edible flowers off of the plate at restaurants. Why not?
so do we want to move it forward to planning and zoning and then have, their recommendation come back to this committee? Or go to full city council after?
So I represent the individual that's brought this request forward on an unrelated matter, so I'm not going to make any motion or vote on
Okay.
that. Just to say, I'm abstaining from that vote or motion.
Well, we have enough members to make a vote.
What's that?
We will.
Do we have enough members?
How many members do
Doing
you
a
have?
Consensus. We can do a consensus for it to move on.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I don't have anything else, no other input to put in it.
I don't
I
either.
have nothing else for it, so.
I do like,
It needs to move on to the council myself, to whoever else got to see it.
Okay.
And then I think it needs to move to either another committee where other members are, but I don't see any other need for us to
I don't either.
see it,
No.
talk
So-
about it here. I think we're clear
We
here.
need to move it to planning.
The consensus would be, go ahead and have planning and zoning look at it, have the hearing, and then, obviously like anything else, if they recommend it, it goes to full city council. If they don't recommend it, then it dies in planning and zoning. So the consensus would be to, move to planning and zoning. Correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, what else do we got here? That was it. Under new business, we don't have anything. No need for executive session. Any Alderman questions and concerns?
We didn't put it on the agenda this time, but in terms of sort of the downtown public drinking, urination issues,
I didn't get that on there, did they?
this time I did want to mention, I think there has been a substantial increase.
Okay.
Last month. I've gotten a number of different complaints.
I did note that in the minutes, yeah.
Yeah, but even since then.
Okay.
I think it's stepped up. My understanding, and we had talked about this a little bit in another meeting, but the money that HUD had been making available for overnight vouchers, so federal money, has since,
Cut.
has dried up in the past month. So individuals who had been finding shelter in hotels throughout the community are not. And that is probably the main reason why you're seeing such a large number of individuals downtown at this point. I know the library says they're kind of, the way that Allison described it was, they're at their peak at this point.
I would concur with what you're saying, because I've seen a whole new group of individuals that I have not seen. And I know of a business that had to have 2 of them removed. one by the, owner of the business, and then one by the police, because the business was closing, and the lady says she didn't have any place to go, but you can't just lock people up into a business. So it is having an impact in the downtown area. I know Officer Wynn, obviously, he tries to do what he can do, but I think he goes home at about 4 or 4:30 or something. So maybe, I'd be willing to go talk to Kidwell, Chief Kidwell, and see, if maybe they can, I don't know, step up, some different patrols, or do we need another officer that's kind of dedicated to, that area? I do know that down by the funeral home, there was it Friday? There was a large group of people, and they were just barbecuing and hanging out. So we'll make a note of that. And
What other places do we have for the ones that are unhoused to be during the day besides the library?
it's a good question. I know a certain percentage, they do go to the library. I know a certain percentage, they find, there's some down by the dam, they go hang out down there.
They're using the pavilion over in Bird Park,
Is it
not the band shell, the pavilion.
in the middle?
Yeah.
Okay. Don't know the answer,
No, I'm just saying, do we have any places we could try to get to accommodate them during the day or something?
Well, the other problem with that is most of the shelters, they're winter shelters.
Right.
When it's
that's what
cold.
I'm saying, yeah.
But I don't know the answer. Don't have the answer to, the
I just think
problem.
it's something that we need to discuss. We need to think about it and try to find a place that we think, it wouldn't be imposing on, people like it is at this point. I think we need to look at a place, that wouldn't be as imposing. Because right now, they just could be anywhere.
I've said it before, it'll never, whatever facility that's out, if it was a high-rise on East Court Street and that was dedicated to people that have been removed from their homes, or whatever the situation would be, it'll never be big enough. Never be big enough. But, anybody has any suggestions on that solution?
It's just something we should think about.
I talked with Barbie today about our next community development committee meeting, and I'd asked if we could get sort of an overview of where things stand of the various providers right now, who's open at what times.
That'd be helpful.
Yeah, because I've heard that Gift of God is not open right now, and not as a seasonal matter, but because they don't have enough volunteers. We just gave $80,000 in order for that shelter to open, so it's surprising that it's not open. If
Well, only about 60,000 of that went to a sprinkler system. So,
the idea being kind of get a lay of the land in terms of what is in existence right now. It's not.
I know, that's just the thing, that's what I really don't know.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, anybody else? I guess I'll make a comment. The United Way had a day of action today, and Earth Day, and we had an amazing group of people. I think they were I would say 95% of them were from CSL, and there was probably 40 or 50 out there helping clean up along the railroad tracks, which, in a few hours, it made a substantial difference and an impact in the area. So, I've said it before, the government's not going to solve the problem. The people are going to solve the problem, and, giving back like that, it don't take too much. I just wish we had more groups like that, that we could put in different areas. So I think it's an amazing day, and I'm thankful that, got enough volunteers to go to different wards and do that, so.
I wish people would stop littering, so.
Say again?
I said, I wish people would stop littering, so, I mean, if they throw it down, who they think got to pick it up? Somebody got to pick it up.
It actually
This
helps.
don't make no
Right.
sense.
But when they see trash out there, they're more apt to throw that cup out there because they're just adding to it versus a nice clean area, so.
Yeah.
But, any other questions and concerns? I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
One Marshall, second by Tolly. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned at 5:58.